Good morning and welcome everybody, and perhaps also good afternoon or good evening, since we have an international crowd for today's talk and webinar. And this event is co-sponsored by the Global Center on Human Trafficking and Research on Interdisciplinary Global Studies, or RIGS, here at Montclair State University. The Center on Human Trafficking is a multidisciplinary effort focused on developing innovative solutions to the global problem of human trafficking. And Montclair State University is one of the most diverse higher education institutions here in the US and has a history of supporting social justice and human rights issues affecting communities across our world. What began as a university initiative spearheaded by a group of committed leaders, faculty, and staff has now grown into a global center working hand in hand with survivors and the world to transform the response to human trafficking. The mission is really the dedication to mobilize collective action to develop novel solutions to the complex problems of human trafficking, so that all people may live free from human trafficking. And the vision is that the center really creates a world in which all people live free from human trafficking. As many know, the second collaborator here, RIGS, is a vibrant hub for innovative research that happens cross-disciplinarily across different faculty collaborations, and it's dedicated to addressing some of the most pressing global challenges of our times. Our work spans a range of critical themes, each designed to foster deeper understanding and real-world solutions. The program here focuses on several key areas: human rights and social justice, where we explore issues related to equity, inclusion, and the fight against systemic oppression; sustainable development, which examines the balance between economic growth, environmental preservation, and social equity; and then migration and displacement, where we address the complexities surrounding refugee crises, forced migration, and the sociopolitical factors driving displacements across different world regions. And then the digital and technological transformations, where we critically assess the impact of artificial intelligence, digital tools, and technology on governance, diplomacy, and social movements. Last but not least, peace building, conflict resolution, engaging with efforts to mediate conflict, foster reconciliation, and promote peaceful coexistence in post-conflict societies. Through these themes, RIGS strives to push the boundaries of traditional academic discourse, promoting collaboration between scholars, practitioners, and activists. We believe that by connecting disciplines and viewpoints, we can better address the global challenges we face today and provide meaningful, actionable insights. Thanks again all for joining us today. Today's talk is part of the lecture series from the Center on Global Perspectives on Human Trafficking, and today's talk is entitled Global Efforts in Dealing with Human Trafficking, a Focus on Child Trafficking. And it features a distinguished expert that examines international responses to one of the most urgent human rights crises of our times, from prevention strategies to survivor support, services, and policy framework. The session will really shed light on how nations and organizations are working to combat the exploitation of children, hosting a collaboration with Montclair's Department of Justice Studies. The event also underscores the importance of interdisciplinary action and global cooperation in addressing child trafficking and its devastating consequences. Let me introduce our speaker here, our esteemed Kingsley Kame Jamira Abroka. He's a child labor specialist at the Food and Agriculture Organization, or short FIO, of the United Nations Regional Office for Africa. With a robust background in migration and child protection, Kingsley has worked extensively to support the safe return of stranded migrants and trafficked individuals through the International Organization for Migration, the IOM. He has also contributed to the Japan International Cooperation Agency's Child Labor Free Zone project, has collaborated with security agencies to rescue, rehabilitate, and reintegrate trafficked children. Kingsley holds a BA in Population and Family Life Education and an MA in Population and Health, with additional training from Tulane University. His deep passion lies in advocating for children, particularly those with mental disabilities. Beyond his professional commitments, Kingsley enjoys playing basketball and aspires to pursue a PhD in the near future. Our moderator today is the director from the Center on Global Human Trafficking, Dr. Danielle Peterka-Benton. She's also a professor in the Department of Justice Studies, and her primary research area includes online misinformation and disinformation, particularly in the context of far-right narratives and conspiracies, with a special focus on the co-optation of human trafficking by extremist groups. She teaches courses such as human trafficking, introduction to international justice, and research in justice studies. Her scholarly work has been published in numerous peer-reviewed journals, including Journal for De-Radicalization Studies, in Conflict and Terrorism, and Anti-Trafficking Review. Prior to her full-time academic career, Dr. Peterka-Benton worked for the U.S. State Department Office of Diplomatic Security at the U.S. Embassy in Vienna, Austria, where she's also from. I look forward to a rich discussion and a collaborative spirit here, which will guide our work today. Let's dive in and explore these new possibilities together, and I'll hand over the floor to Kingsley.
Actually, before we start, I just wanted to jump in.
Very good,
Thank you, first of all, for the lovely introduction, Arno. To our people in the audience, if you have any questions throughout Kingsley's talk, please put them in the Q&A box, and we will get to them at the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks for reminding me, Dani. And by all means, do this during the presentation already. So don't wait till the very end. If anything is unclear or something pops into your mind, by all means, share that. Thank you. And floor is all yours, Kingsley.
So as you rightly put, this is going to be more of a discussion and also share my perspective on the issue of child trafficking, the global perspective. First of all, I would like to say thank you to Dani and the colleagues out there for making it possible for me to be here. I know that you guys wish I was in Jersey this time around, but unfortunately I am here, and I am grateful. Just before I go on, I would like to issue a disclaimer. Because of the place I work, the views expressed in this presentation and during this session are my own and not representative of the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. I take full responsibility for all the statements made and materials presented in this webinar. But, you know, to give you a fair idea of what we're going to have for today's webinar, I'm going to try and give you a background to all this. I'm also going to try and give you a global outlook to some of the things that culminate into the issue of child labor, as we're talking about here, and then how these manifest, how child labor manifests, child trafficking. I'm sorry I'm saying child labor because my background is in, my work is in child labor, and so child labor is swelling off my head. So then we'll talk about what really happened, the grounds that we've gained globally, some of the achievements that we've made, and then we'll walk into the next steps and what next, okay? So to start with, a little background. So somewhere in 2015, the United Nations came up with 17 Sustainable Development Goals. These Sustainable Development Goals were accompanied with 169 targets for each one of them. Now, for purposes of those who don't understand what the SDGs are and what really it means in terms of what targets are, you could look at the SDGs as goals, all right? And then you could look at the targets as the very fine to-do list that will take you to the targets, all right? So the targets under each one of those goals have the to-do list. Now, under the target 8, which talks about economics and some other things, I readily don't, it's a long list. One of the targets is target 8.7, which aims to having a global commitment to the eradication of forced labor, modern-day slavery, human trafficking, child labor, as well as a secure, safe working conditions and protection for all workers by the year 2025. As you know, we are in the year 2025 already, and the big question is whether this particular target has been achieved. You could look at it right from the word go that in this target are swelled up with so many indicators under modern day slavery or modern slavery, indicators under forced labor, indicators under human trafficking, indicators under child labor, and then also what we often will call decent work, okay? So all this have been put together in one target that the world aimed to achieve at the end of 2025. Unfortunately, looking at what we have now, the reports from the United Nations on the targets says that we have about 15% of the targets on course. We have some of them, majority of them, which, I mean, we have not done anything about at all. So there is fear and there is also the anxiety of unenableness to do this. Some writers have also said that the targets were overly ambitious. Well, that I would leave it to all of us to digest as we continue. Now, I'd like to take you through the global outlook. How does the issue of child trafficking look like in terms of estimates? Remember, these are estimates. And so most estimates rely on country reporting to the UN or those producing the reports. I'll talk to you about some of the reports that I relied on for this. There are some coming from the United Nations Office for Drug and Crime. There's some also coming from the United Nations Office, the International Labour Organization. There's some coming from the Europol, call it the European Union's police agency, kind of, it's the law enforcement agency arm of the European Union. Some of the reports is by the US State Department Trafficking in Persons report. There's other reports from Freedom Walk and also the International Organization for Migration, the UN Migration. So these are different reports which are churned out different times in the year. So I relied mostly on these reports to look at how things have been globally and working in this space also to look at how things have been. First of all, there are the UN, okay, so let me explain this briefly. ILO, International Labour Organization, and IOM are formed by different bodies, you know, different institutions form these organizations. ILO is formed by trade unions, okay? And the IOM, for instance, are formed by member states, so states and all that. Work Freedom is, call it an NGO, a non-profit organization. So they came out sometime in 2017 with the global estimates as 52 million people are found in modern day slavery. Out of this number, we have 11.8 million being women and girls. The number of girls have increased by 38% since the last estimate. 3.3 million children are found in various forms of forced labor. Now, over half of the children are found in commercial sex exploitation, what some may term as child prostitution. The right terminology is commercial sex exploitation. And by way of education, practitioners in this field believe that children themselves will not voluntarily go into that act, and hence, if children who find themselves in these situation are being exploited or were pushed into this in one way or the other. Now, what is very alarming is that the United Nations Office for Crime and Drugs indicates that 63% of trafficking victims detected worldwide were females. Now, what is more devastating is that children now account for majority of trafficked victims detected globally. So their last report, that's in 2024, indicates that you have more children who are being trafficked and in the global space, and most of them will discover very soon which sectors and which areas they are found. A third of all cross-border human trafficking flows involve citizens of Africa. So if you take majority of those who are trafficked across borders, so trafficking can be split into two. You have internal trafficking, so maybe for purposes of those who live in the States, maybe from one state to the other, or from one coast to the other coast, maybe from West Coast to the East Coast, that is internal within the United States. Then you have what we call cross-border trafficking. That is either people coming from Mexico, Costa Rica, Puerto Rico, or any other places coming into the United States of America. Similarly, you have victims or people being trafficked from, let's say, Nigeria to Ghana, or from Ghana to South Africa, or to the northern part of Africa, the Persian regions and the Sahel regions. Once you move from your country to the other country, that is called cross-border trafficking. And this UNOCD is telling us that 1/3 of all cross-border human trafficking flows involves African citizens. Okay, I'm moving too fast. Okay, so now the question that begets all of us and people would want to find out is, how does this human trafficking manifest? In which areas do we find them? The first amongst all of them, particularly for children, contextualizing this, please, let's focus and put in our minds that we are talking about child trafficking. So most of the things, without me saying, and unless otherwise I say, I'm referring to child trafficking, all right? Now, first on the list is commercial sex exploitation. Now, if you refer to the previous slide, you would notice that I said that 63% of the people who are trafficked globally are females, and majority of them are trafficked for commercial sex exploitation. Girls are being trafficked for commercial sex exploitation. Now, there is another area which is gaining grounds, which now commercial sex exploitation is not just, excuse my French, you might have girls being on the streets, on the red light districts in the big cities or in the small towns where people go and solicit for whatever they want to do. What commercial sex exploitation goes beyond that. It goes even into where you have pornographic and pornographic performances, children who are recruited for those purposes, and also other things that describes commercial sex exploitation, all right? Now, child marriage is also gaining increase over the years. In fact, forced marriages is gaining increase over the years. In Asia, you have 2/3 of forced marriages forming 14.2 million people. In Africa, remember, all these are estimates and these are reported cases. You can then begin to think about the unreported cases, all right? Now, in Africa, you have 14.5% of the total child marriage cases, forced marriage cases, being 3.2 million. Now, here's the catch. Remember, we are talking about child trafficking. Now, if we go into the books, when I talk about the books, the definition of human trafficking, there is nowhere in the human trafficking definition that mentions child marriage. There's no legislation that I have come across that seeks to talk about human trafficking or child trafficking that explicitly mentions child marriage. However, in the Palermo Protocol, the protocol that sets up all these discussions that we are having, or this talk we are having about the human trafficking, under the Article 8, it mentions forced slavery and slavery-like practices. So activities or things that people do that mimics or looks like the person is in bondage or slave, or looks like the person is enslaved. Now, under that definition, under that description, you can have the issue of child marriage coming out there. So I need to make it clear that there's nowhere in the definition of the Palermo Protocol that states or mentions child marriage. Now, there are other areas which we don't have too much indices on. Unfortunately, it's because the issue of child trafficking is done clandestinely, and it involves so many rings and it's very complex. And it's because of that we are unable to deduce so much indices like we may have for other health issues that you may have statistics on. In this case, it's also because governments have not also taken pain and invested in this, getting in, data on these issues. So we don't have too much information on it. And that's how come you see very scanty information in my presentation on domestic work, agriculture, and manufacturing. The next one is child soldiers. Now, this particular one, I dare to say that, again, we don't have too much indices on them, but anecdotal evidence and also from the books, or the books also tells us that a lot of this under child soldiering is internal trafficking. And not to say that you don't have people being trafficked cross-border, but a lot of recruitment for child soldiers happen internally. There are cases where we have cited examples of children being trafficked from neighboring countries, particularly where there were civil wars in Western Africa, into other countries. But again, we don't have too much information about that. My last one, in areas of manifestation or where these issues of child trafficking can be found, is organ theft or organ harvest. And this, again, you would see that UNODC has indicated that 0.2% of detected victims globally, or reported victims globally, fall into this category. Places within Northern Africa and Middle East are where cases are highly reported. Now, this, again, I need to emphasize that it is part of the definition of the Palermo Protocol. In fact, in recent times, publications of estimates have actually delved into the issue of organ theft or organ harvest. For those who are interested, you could read about the case between the Nigeria Senate officer, and the state of England, the UK versus that Nigerian state of former state Senate officer. Now, the story is like the Senate officer, through another person who lives in UK, recruited a young man in Nigeria with the aim of going to stay in Nigeria as a domestic servant. Upon arrival in the UK, unfortunately, the issue was he was sent to the hospital for the regular checks for him, to make sure that his organ that they needed was matches the recipient. So he is a donor. He had no clue that he was a donor. He had followed the rich family because he wanted to work outside as a domestic servant. And this person A, who lives in England, facilitated that he would move from Nigeria to that place, and knowing that he was going to work for the Senate's family, okay? What happened was that during questioning and debriefing of this young person, whose name has been withheld, in the case study, his name as victim C, or person C, sorry, person C. Person C, who is the victim, did not fairly comprehend what the doctors were trying to describe to him. So there was an interpreter. The interpreter then will interpret wrongly to the medical staff. And this went on till the medical staff got to the whims that no, this person is not well prepared for this procedure to harvest his organ. And so they declined, the hospital declined. And the case was made in the books that they were not sure of this and they suspect a case of human trafficking. The boy was sent to his hostel or his hotel, awaiting to be brought back to Nigeria so that the procedure will take place there. Unfortunately, when he got to the hotel, as smart as he is, he decided to leave and bolted to the nearest police station and reported the case. And that is how come the senator and his accomplice plus his wife were arrested in UK. They wanted to harvest the kidney for their daughter, who was terminally ill and needed a kidney donor. And this agent who was recruiting this young man had also had a donation before, and so he sort of understood what was going on. So organ theft and organ harvest is a very it's a growing phenomenon or an issue that borders on child trafficking. This person that I'm talking to, person C, we don't know. I don't know whether it's a child or it's an adult. But whatever it is, in whichever case, it's against the rules. I will share in the slide as I finish with a YouTube link to the case as it was done in, and then details of the case in the slides later on. So what really happened? What actually happened that we are at this point where we are talking about child trafficking, and we set the targets in under target 8.7, and now we are bemoaning what exactly is going on. I don't know what happened. I really don't know, but I'm hesitating to guess. First, what I think had happened is that there have been poverty heights around the world. We know, for instance, that global poverty levels amongst developing nations have increased over the years. And poverty is the root cause of child trafficking. I remember in a case where a victim was sold or given to another person for less than $1 because the victim's mother was needed money to go to a next town to go and announce the demise of her husband. So she needed funds to do that. There are cases where people have traded their children because they needed money to upkeep the family. Their children never came back. Do we have the political will? One of the causes that I think I hesitate to say is that I think government have not been able to provided that political will to actually address the issue, the root causes of child trafficking. And it is a growing phenomenon. I can ask anybody on this call, on this webinar, how many times have we heard, if not when a report has been released, like TIP has been released, have we heard that there is something to discuss about child trafficking? No. We are interested in other things. We are interested in Ukraine at war. We are interested in trade war between Canada and United States. We are interested in people scavenging our lands in Ghana, in Namibia, in Zambia, in Zimbabwe, in Kenya, and in Uganda. That's what we are interested in. But the things that actually breaks the very fiber of our society, the very fiber of our society which borders on children, we tend to ignore that. So there is no political will. Politicians are interested in raising finances to develop infrastructure, you know, but this has not yet come to the table yet. It comes as an occasion once in a while. Now, again, we have come to understand that there are global fund cuts for humanitarian work, including migration. In fact, the head of the DG of IOM said, I took that from Reuters, that there has been in 2026, there will be 63% funding cut. I'm sorry, 36% funding cut that will come from global donors. Again, here, already there are cuts already in various areas and in various agencies. What that means is that protection, prevention, and prosecution of cases of human trafficking and child trafficking particularly will have a dying, it will have dying consequences on these. Now, in all this, you know, we know what is going on. I mean, in the States, for instance, America has reduced global funding, and some other institutions countries, bilaterals have already reduced funding and all that. We know USAID, for instance, there are organizations which have collapsed totally. I can tell you of the Global Fund for Human Trafficking. It stops, it has halted its work as of 2024. That is maybe way before the United States announced cuts, all right? But people like anti-human trafficking agents, organizations have also indicated that funding towards reducing or preventing trafficking has reduced dramatically. This would increase poverty levels. This would increase the level of hunger. This would increase the lack of resources for protection of victims, children who are victimized or who fall in the area of child trafficking. I need not say much about climate disasters and conflict. In fact, the UNOCD reports that one of the major things that has exacerbated child trafficking after the COVID era is climate disasters and conflict. The numbers of people who have been trafficked has increased more than it was before COVID era. In fact, during COVID era, issues of trafficking went down dramatically. Well, some say COVID may be a blessing in this case. My final point here is weak institutions. Weak institutions in terms of responses. We may have had very solid institutions that seeks to prevent and protect and prosecute issues of child trafficking. But the point here is we have had slow conviction. In fact, it is longer to prosecute a case in child trafficking than it is to prosecute a case in sexual abuse. It takes a longer time because when you look at most legislations around the world and regulations, emphasis has been placed on the victim's testimony. And if they don't have strong testimonies that will make, and lawyers have their way of defending some of these cases, the cases will be let go. So you would have arrest, start prosecution, but conviction has never been attained because all because the wheel of justice, they say, grinds slowly. All right. If you compare current prosecution and conviction to the magnitude of the cases that we have, think about 3.3 million children globally. Think about 11.8 million women and girls. I'm not accounting for men. And remember, these are just estimates. The story doesn't look all, it doesn't look dead as it looks like. There has been some success in doing this, and some key milestones that have been chalked as a result of this. And I would like to share some of the key milestones. Globally, globally, we have had universal ratification of the ILO Convention 182, which talks about the worst forms of child labor. Now, somebody would say, Kingsley, why are you bringing worst forms of child labor into child trafficking? If you read the Convention 182, it starts with, the preamble starts with recruitment and engaging children in. First one is slavery-like practices. The second one is pornographic and pornographic performances. The third category is illicit activities, illegal and illicit activities. The fourth one is hazardous work. So if any child is recruited for any of these broader categories of things that I've mentioned now, it constitutes trafficking. So you may be recruited for these ones, and that is why I put it here, the universal ratification of ILO Convention 182. This is good news because all member states and all those who belong to ILO have ratified this convention. There is a new regulation I won't say new, it's been there for quite a while, called the European Union Deforestation Regulation, which seeks to protect and also introduce some kind of regulations for forestry and forestry products, particularly for coffee, cow, cocoa, and I forgot the last one. But essentially, it seeks to put onus on those who are sourcing these products from anywhere to make sure that they are free from issues of environmental degradation and child labor, or child labor in its worst form. Its sister regulation, as I call it, the EU Human Rights and Environmental Due Diligence, also puts responsibility of sourcing companies to do that. In fact, this regulation has been enforced on bigger companies as of 2024, and in 2025 for smaller companies, this year, it's going to be enforced. In terms of regional action, because I'm in Africa, I can speak about this. The AU has a 10-year action plan to eradicate child labor, forced labor, human trafficking, and modern slavery. And this came into development in 2020, and hoping that 2030, the action plan would have been able to make strides in the area of these issues we are mentioning. It doesn't single out child trafficking, but of course, we're talking about human trafficking. Now, companies are also improving on ethical sourcing for products. I recall in 2017, between 2017 and 2019, I was privileged to work with some gold institutions to actually, examine the supply chain of artisanal miners and see where there are issues of worst forms of child labor within the supply chain. And so this formed the basis for that company to be able to ensure that proper due diligence is done on the sourcing of its product. And I think that's good news for all of us. The use of technology and awareness raising for prosecution and data collection. Now, I'll talk briefly about this because it's an area that I seek to advance a lot more. Because I think that globally, we know that there's an increase in recruitment of children online. And Danny, I know is an area which you are very passionate about in terms of online recruitment, online issues that has to do with exploitation and child and human trafficking. Now, what we have begun to do globally is that to meet these perpetrators at where they fashion. So for instance, because a lot of online recruitment is going on now, using various apps, kids are on different apps and on different, devices. Perpetrators or criminals also are infiltrating into these devices and apps to lure children into those areas. What has happened is that practitioners in the area of preventing child trafficking and prosecution have also started developing applications and monitoring some of these sites to see where and gather information and data to prevent and stop child abuses that happen online or recruitment that may happen online. I can readily speak about the IOM app that seeks to connect, network all NGOs, some NGOs in the area of human trafficking to collect data and also use for its estimation, contribute to its estimation. Now we are having more sophisticated AI tools that now can mimic and be able to, predict using the right machine learning approaches to know where and how these criminal organizations and criminals are going to use or will be using to lure people into such areas. And so we have gone a little bit advanced in that. There is another NGO, I forgot the name, I'll share that with you pretty soon, which is in Canada and has also developed an app that seeks to share messages on how people to look out, how to help people to look out for people who are trafficked and also for victims who are trafficked to be able to make reports or report cases of trafficking using that same app. So there's some work that has been done, but like me, I would say, Oliver Twist, I would want more. So now what next? What is the next step, or what are we supposed to be doing now? I think the way forward, I don't know. I really don't know. But what I can say is that we must begin to promote ethical recruitment. You know, we must begin to look at the very fine details of recruiting, such that people who are recruited don't fall victim to, children who are recruited for various forms of work don't fall victims to issues of trafficking. Now, here's the case. I said children are recruited for various forms of work because we have a minimum age at which every child can work. The minimum age convention puts the minimum age for employment at 15. It also gives room for countries to be able to set their own age for children for children to work. Again, to contextualize issues, when I say children, I'm talking about from 0 year till 17, or till, as we say in other jurisdictions, till you attain your 18th birthday. You are still a child. So the minimum age is set between from 15, 16, 17 years. The law allows children to work. And that's why when we go to some of what you call it, shops and supermarkets and fast food areas, we will see children working there. The law permits them to do it, you know. In fact, it also sets the minimum age for apprenticeship. So what I am saying is that here, we must begin to promote ethical recruitment to prevent abuse and fraudulent activities. Law enforcement. Well, since I started working in this area, in this sector, about 21 years ago, it has been a major issue. Big issue in the area to combat child trafficking has been law enforcement. I think the way forward is that we must continue to empower and provide the necessary skills, tools for them to perform their jobs very well. How to identify, how to conduct rescues, and how to also enforce the law in places where it lags. Law enforcement is very key. I'm not taking out any country. Globally, law enforcement has not been the best. But again, like I showed you earlier, strides have been made and we need to do more. We must enhance technology. I told you this is my favorite part. We must enhance the use of technology for advocacy and also for law enforcement. Privacy, I don't know who has been able to, I don't know anybody on this call who have read the entire privacy statement in any of the applications that we subscribe to. I'm yet to see the privacy thing that they ask us to check. We just scroll up and we check and we're off we go. I am saying that because technology is advancing and always criminals are some few miles ahead of us, we need to enhance our technology and the use of it for advocacy, for victims' recovery, for identification of perpetrators, particularly those online exploitation. If you're on a dating app, I'm not saying it's bad. All I'm saying is that you got to be careful. If you're on any of those social media sites, you have to be extra careful. After this presentation, you should know that we are all at risk, not only our children. So if you are an adult, you're at risk, imagine the children. We must continue to write more. I think we've stopped writing. And here, I'm throwing the challenge to anybody who would like to write, to maybe we can co-author. We might think about something and co-author. And I'm interested in doing that. So after this webinar, if you're interested to write, because my issue is we are not writing enough. We are not writing to provoke those in authority to think beyond infrastructure. Excuse my French again. Or to think beyond all those other things that is going on in our space now. Just yesterday, I was listening to the new Canadian Prime Minister, and his words were very, very vociferous on the issue of the trade trade embargo. The trade tariffs and other things that the current government of the United States intends to put across or have sort of slammed on some of these countries that are its global partners. So my issue is, how do we move or influence the discussion in the global space? It's only through writing, only through publication and advocacy, consistent advocacy and writing. We can advocate through our writing. Financial sector. See, because child trafficking falls within the space of organized crime, most of these rings that work or do their clandestine movements on child trafficking have other sources of businesses which may be linked to this organized crime. It is I think financial institutions also need to play a role in this, so that those who intend to bring their resources for them for cleanup will then begin to know that it is not an easy thing to just go and clean up your money like that. So financial institutions should come to the play to support us all in the fight against child trafficking. Somebody asked me, Kingsley, if you are bringing me money that would increase my revenue or to make my bank look good, why do I have to go and report? To what? And I say to the person, don't report. Maybe, and I don't wish that, maybe the next person, the next victim might come from your family or maybe next to you. And so because of that, and because of the common good, we would have to safeguard that. And that is why we would report. I think we need to diversify our sources of global funding. Maybe that is what the United States and other multilateral aid, humanitarian aids are telling us. That look, you've been dependent on us for a long time. You need to change the way of depending. Maybe you need to diversify the global sources of funding towards prevention and prosecution and protecting victims of trafficking. How do we do that? How do we raise the resources? At what levels do we consider, or would we consider resource mobilization as a key part of this struggle to, to stop the issue of child trafficking globally? That's it. I would like to share with you some of the documents that I work with. If you have the time, you can read the Trafficking in Persons report for 2024. A very great document from the US State Department. Hopefully they will continue to publish it. I hope that the current administration would not take this one out. And then the International Labour Organization has a global estimate for modern day slavery, which it often publishes alongside with IOM and alongside IOM. The International Organization for Migration has a World Migration Report, which it releases annually. It's also a great source of document that you can read. The Global Trafficking Report, the latest one, is the Trafficking in Persons Report, Global Report on Trafficking in Persons 2024. This particular one speaks a lot about the use of technology and shows the trends in terms of where movements have been going. It's a very useful document. I really liked it when I was reading it. And then the last one that I spoke very little about, which is the UN Europol, which also has trafficking in persons, trafficking in human beings reports. Now, all these reports has various times that they release them. I would entreat you to read and come out and also be informed of what is going on around you regionally and also at the global level. Okay, so at this point, I would invite questions. You're free to ask questions, and I know you may have so many things you'd want to ask, and thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Kingsley. This was a very interesting, also sobering kind of talk in the world we live today, right? And all the changes we already see from particularly, funding changes. I mean, it's really concerning. So thank you very much for giving us a little bit of that international perspective. We only have 5 minutes left, but we do have one question actually that was posted. If anybody else has another question, please do so. Some of the questions that the person had were already answered, but they were interested in additional resources to identify people who have been trafficked, as it will help in educating the public and thereby helping to eradicate this problem. As a mother and grandmother, I cringe to think about how vulnerable we all are.
Danny, I think I will defer that one to you. I think the global traffic, the global center at Montclair State University is doing tremendous work on this. I am amazed. In terms of how victims support and identifying that, there are resources that I think already exist in that space. However, there are also resources within the space of the International Organization for Migration and ILO. I can collate that, I can put that together and then share with as we share the link for what you call it for participants and other users, we may also be able to share that with other users. But readily, I can speak on top of my head that these two organizations are in lead role in doing that. There is also another organization called Free the Slaves, who are also doing, who may also have some resources on that, but I can't readily provide those links to those resources. My apologies. Thank you.
Thank you. Also for everyone, I put the link to the Global Center on Human Trafficking in the chat. I think you should all see it. So we have a list, a newsletter you can subscribe to, and you also see all the events that are upcoming. So please, if you're interested to connect with us this way, do so. We have another question. I don't know if I lost Kingsley here for a sec. I don't know, Kingsley, if you can hear us, but it looks like he may have switched away. But if you can hear us, Kingsley, a quick question: how can Gen AI help in preventing and eliminating human trafficking? Kingsley, are you still there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so how can AI so like I told you before, AI, for instance, and you see, when we talk about AI, a lot of people are a bit skewed towards imagery, which is very good because AI is able to help to define certain things when it has to do with pictures. But AI goes beyond that, you know. AI is able to we're able to use AI to predict and project things that are likely to happen. We are able to use technology to mimic, based on the data, to mimic what had been in the past and what is likely to become. So it is a very important tool, but unfortunately, criminals are also using AI, devising, putting up images and other things that does not really let me put quote unquote humans, and using that to lure other people into trafficking, so, or into other forms of exploitation. So it has its good side and it has its bad side. We have not really how do you call it, unearthed the potential of AI yet. I have not come across writings, but I know that there's a possibility of using AI to solve some of these things. I hope I answered the question.
Thank you. And I think we have time for one last question. Most of these traffickers, especially for sexual exploitation, make all efforts to coach the children not to mention their actual age, but rather mention ages that make them look as adults who have given their consent for the act. My question is, what measures are being put in place to rescue such children?
Fantastic. This is a very beautiful question. Look, I can tell you for a fact, and from my practice, that children will tell you the truth at some point in time. Our way of profiling children in the past has changed now. So when you ask, and children, and Danny, if you recall, when I was trying to do this learning session with your students the other time, teaching them how to actually interview children who have caught up in trafficking. One of the things that you need to do for a child is to let him have a conducive environment, to have the trust in the person, to enable him to devour this information. It takes them time. It takes them time. It may take them 2 months, 3 months, but it takes them time. So in order to be able to overcome this, there should be proper training given to those who are protecting victims to understand the psychology of children, that it doesn't take, when you ask the child and he says, I'm 18 or 19 years old, it's because he's been coached to say that. So you need to give him time to develop trust in the environment, allow him or her to play, allow her to do all that she has to do as a child, and in that, occasionally engage the child. Not very formal, very informal at first, and later on in the formal way. The child's defenses or brainwash or whatever it is will come down and eventually will tell you what the right age is. One last comment on that. So now we also have MRI scans that you can do on the bones that will determine what the real age of these children are. So that same system that they use for soccer players before they go and play and make, that same system can be used for children, so that if in the worst case scenario, this is prolonging because there's no resources to keep the child and is going to be prepared for prosecution. All these things can be done together to help to identify what the child's actual age is. I hope I attempted a good to answer the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Kingsley, and thank you all. There's several other questions, but we unfortunately have come to the end of our webinar. If you have some burning questions, I'm sure that Kingsley is willing to answer them through email. You can also reach out to me or the Global Center on Human Trafficking. And I would like to thank you, Kingsley, so very much again for being here today with us and to enlighten us and share your experience on this really, really sad topic. And I hope we all will do better in the future. That's all we really can hope for, I guess, at this point.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Danny, for your time, and thank you everybody for coming to listen to us. We wish you a wonderful day and take care of yourself.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you, everybody. Bye.